Su-Yee, and I'll be reading a short nonfiction piece on China called On Trust. In Yangshuo, a tiny town nestled into the surrounding karst mountains near meandering rivers not far from Guilin, I stayed at a hostel outside of town, down a dirt track road that was unlit at night. I was picked up by the hostel owner, Along, in a contraption that was half wagon, half bicycle, past the river market and out to the rice fields. I took a bicycle and rode miles out through the countryside to see a mountain with the shape of a moon cut out of it, to see lotus gardens that you pay 3 renminbi to walk through, and past a river full of bamboo rafts and mountains jutting out everywhere. On the way back, the night was lit only by the headlights of the few cars I passed and some shining signs of restaurants. I stopped, tired and sweaty, at a small restaurant that sold only guilin mixian, a type of local rice noodle dish with pickled vegetables and nuts that you spooned on yourself. The way back to town reminded me of the mountains of Sedona, going from one bright spot to the next with darkness in between and the shadows of mountains. There's a darkness there that doesn't happen in the areas of New York where I'm from. After rock climbing one day, Yangshuo is, after all, one of Asia's climbing destinations. My guide, Jason, took me to a restaurant specializing in clay pot dishes and a local hangout spot for climbers. There, the chef, when he found out I was researching Chinese folktales, told me that if I came for dinner, he'd tell me the story of the local specialty of pijiu, or beerfish. But that night, instead, there were German climbers who told me about mysterious climbing caves with names like Treasure Cave and Bamboo Cave. The next day, I rode out to the Yulong River and tried to find these caves, but with the heat pounding down, my lack of water and shoddy directions, I was out of luck. An artist with my last name gave me a ride on his scooter through the adjacent town and into Yangshuo, back to the clay pot restaurant where I was finally told the story of the beerfish dish. A simple story, an accident of beer dropping into the wok while the fish was cooking, but nice to hear from a local. From Guilin, I took a 25-hour train ride to Chengdu, hard seat because the sleepers had been sold out long before. It was the only train connecting the two cities, and the aisles were filled with bags, with children and adults sitting on makeshift stools. Across the aisle, a family of 5, the children 2 boys and a girl. But the girl was the center of attention, all sass, as she haggled with the train crew that sold toy trains and toothbrushes. "How about I buy 1 and you give me 2 free?" she asked. Later on, the women with seats would take her on their laps, take photos with her, ask her, "Do you want to come live with us?" She had that sort of charm. The man sitting next to me, on the other hand, when I asked what he had been doing in Guilin, told me in low tones that he was a pianzi, a scammer. Funny that he would feel the need to confide and explain in the face of my confusion, and despite the fact that those across from us could probably overhear him, and I only knew half the words he was saying. What I got was some sort of internet scam that had fallen through in Guilin, enticing young men to give girls money on QQ, China's biggest social network. He asked me if I use the internet often, and I said, "Not really." He nodded, said, "Good, there's a lot of bad stuff out there." He's just looking out for me. I spent the entirety of the ride cautious, as my ankles swelled a little from sitting too long, as we shuffled from the bathroom and back, as he asked me about the book I was reading written in English, and yet seemed to somehow miss the fact I was a foreigner. There was little sleep, and the journey took longer than it should have. I tried to get a last-minute sleeper by queuing up and placing my name on the list, but there was never one open. But in the end, nothing happened. We said goodbye and we left, so many of my questions still unanswered, about what exactly he did, but still there was trust there in the telling and in the accepting. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's pretty loud. My name is Cedrick Mendoza-Tolentino, and I'll be reading from the beginning of my novel, 1001 Facts Relating to Stanley McNamara's Somewhat Exceptional Life, which is basically 1001 separate facts or chapters following Stanley and the different people moving in and out of his life. 1001 Facts Relating to Stanley McNamara's Somewhat Exceptional Life. 1. Stanley McNamara was born on July 4th, 1982 at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in New York City. It took Stanley many years to realize that the red, white, and blue fireworks shot into the air on his birthday each year were not meant for him specifically, but for the other 300 million or so people that consider the United States home. 2. Stanley's birth had been successful in the same way that people who exit a plane often say that any landing you can walk away from is a good one. He had somehow managed to get himself into the occiput posterior position, a fancy way of saying face up instead of face down, the optimal position that babies were supposed to assume when exiting their mother's womb, which meant that Dr. Chi had been forced to use a set of forceps to pull Stanley free. "It's as if the little guy doesn't want to come out," she said to no one in particular, though she elicited a chuckle from two of the nurses in the delivery room. Dr. Chi was not kidding. Stanley was over 2 weeks past due when he finally breathed his first breath of fresh air. 3. When Stanley heard the story about his birth and of the need to use forceps, he immediately reached for the top of his head, where his fingers found the 2 indents where the metal forceps had dug into his skull. "Mom, how could you let them do this to me? How many brain cells do you think I lost? Do you know how smart I could have been? What a disaster." 4. Ever since Stanley had learned of what he had dubbed the forceps disaster of 1982, whenever he struggled with a test of any sort, he would reach for the indents in his head, wondering if he would not be struggling if those indents were filled with the brain cells that had been killed when Dr. Chi used the forceps to pull him out of his mother. Though Dr. Chi would have been a more natural focal point for Stanley's resentment, Stanley resented his mother for allowing someone to take away thousands of his precious brain cells. 5. While Stanley did not resent his mother for too many things, there were a few things whose blame he placed squarely on her shoulders. In addition to the lost brain cells, Stanley blamed his mother for, among other things, 1. The gray that began peppering his hair beginning at the age of 11, though he thanked her for his full head of hair, which he had been told was inherited from your mother's side. 2. His very average metabolism. No one ever remarked, "Wow, Stanley, how do you eat so much and stay so thin?" And 3. His below average hand-eye coordination. His athletic peak was in the 4th grade when he scored the winning run after letting a pitcher hit him with the bases loaded. His mother did her best not to roll her eyes whenever Stanley went into a rant, blaming her for any and all of these things, though Stanley had caught her doing just that a number of times. 6. Even though Stanley had come out looking strong and healthy, Dr. Chi was worried that she had pressed too hard with the forceps and had caused permanent brain damage. As she walked out of the delivery room, Dr. Chi went straight to her desk and filled out paperwork to ensure that Stanley would remain under observation for a few days. Though she felt that it was unlikely that any permanent damage had been done, people were willing to sue doctors over just about anything these days. She needed to do everything in her power to make sure that Stanley's parents liked her enough that no matter what happened, they would not elect to sue. She never wanted to fear that one day she would open her door and find a stranger waiting to say the dreaded phrase, "You got served." 7. Though it would not be apparent until Stanley was 8 years old, the forceps had indeed permanently affected him. Somehow, inexplicably, each metal piece had left a separate lasting impact. The tip that caused the right indent on Stanley's head had gifted him with a photographic memory, and the tip that had caused the left indent had made it unable to feel any physical pain. 8. Stanley's mother, Penelope McNamara, née Liao, was a tiny woman. Though she was listed at 5 feet on her driver's license, she was actually a shade below 4'11". And the only time Penelope was 5 feet tall was after she had applied a quarter of a ball of hairspray in the morning in order to get ready for work. She used to wear heels to camouflage her vertical challengeness, but when she tore her ACL after getting a heel caught in a subway grate, Penelope vowed to never wear heels again. 9. Although Penelope had a driver's license, like so many of her fellow New Yorkers, she had not been behind the wheel of a car for over a decade. The license was not a certification of her driving ability. It was her only form of identification. 10. And while Penelope could be seen most days wearing flats of all shades and colors, she was known to occasionally take a free pass on her vow never to wear heels. This most often happened when she was walking by Barney's and saw a pair of Manolo Blahnik pumps that she just had to buy. 11. When Stanley first laid eyes on her son, who she thought had to be over 20 pounds. He was in fact 12 pounds 3 ounces. She was certain that she had been right all along, and that Stanley had eaten his twin brother Robert while in the womb. After her husband had insisted on naming their first son after his own father, Penelope had gone ahead and named her other son after Robert Redford, her current crush. All throughout her pregnancy, she had been convinced that there were two wonderful little creatures playing around in her belly. What else could explain the constant moving about? And what else could explain how much weight she had put on her tiny frame? 12. Dr. Chi had urged Penelope to lay off the pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream that she insisted on eating before going to bed every night, but Penelope would have none of it. Every time she set foot in a grocery store or convenience store, the frozen dessert section beckoned her, the same way that the sirens beckoned Odysseus on his long journey home. 13. Whenever Stanley had the chance to eat ice cream, he took it. Countless birthday parties, whether his own or someone else's, ended with him lying on a couch, stuffed with ice cream, struggling to find a comfortable position to lie in as his body went about the uncomfortable process of digesting more ice cream than any person ought to consume at any one time. 14. I like the soundtrack. Stanley would blame this limitless desire for Ben & Jerry's fish food on his mother's enormous consumption of it while he was in her womb. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming out tonight. I'm Dwyer Murphy, and when I get a captive audience like you are tonight, I tend to get a little evangelical about the foods of southeastern Massachusetts. And when I was looking through my novel for a section to read you guys, I came across a passage that I think of as the linguiça passage. For those of you who don't know, probably most of you don't, a linguiça is a Portuguese sausage, and you usually get it ground up and stuffed in a clam, maybe sliced and put on a pizza or kind of like a hot dog. And that's really all the context you'll need for this story, and if you like what you hear about linguiça, come check me out later, and next time I come up with a stash, I will send you an email and we can eat some sausage. There's food at home, and Ingram pays his share to the grocery kitty, but having lunch in town is an easy independence. He buys a sausage and sits on a bench across from the old ice factory. The crowds won't be down until the 4th. Back at the house, the kids are probably just getting in from swim lessons, probably eating bologna sandwiches cut crosswise and telling long, involved stories to anyone who will listen. Once in a while, they hit on something worth hearing, like the time the head instructor brought along his girlfriend, and she taught them how to catch horseshoe crabs with kite string and a cigarette butt. Most of the time, they just want to show you the backstroke like it's something they invented. They're good kids, but they're not his kids. And even after the wedding, no matter how much they love their Aunt Cassie, it's hard to imagine a world in which they think of him as anything more than that tall, restless uncle who lived in their backyard for a while. That summer he was out of work. The ice cream peddler, who's also the sausage peddler, stops to talk sometimes. He tells Ingram about how the town used to be, after the ice factory closed, but before they lost the fleet and had to start relying on summer tourists and Boston yuppies. The peddler's older, 50, maybe 55. His hair is mostly gray, but his legs are tanned and powerful from riding all day. Apparently, he used to own a computer school, but that was years ago. Now he has the bike and the cart with the 2 boxes. The one for ice cream, the other for sausage. Simpler the machine, the better, he says. Took me long enough to learn it, but I sure as shit did. While they talk, he revs the pedals of the bike, an inch forward, then an inch back, and the cart registers each movement, alive as either of them. And from inside the cold box, you can hear the hiss of the ice cream bars sliding back and forth. The ice cream is what makes money, but the peddler's favorite subject is the linguiça, which he buys wholesale from a meat market down the coast, grills, and sells in a bun between the hours of 11 and 1. The market changed formulas a decade ago, but the betrayal's still fresh. The peddler talks about it almost every day. Old stuff was live ammunition, he says. Put it on a skillet, just look at it the wrong way, bam, you got a squirt of grease right in the eye. Back then in the old days, they knew how to make a fucking sausage with some attitude. Piss and vinegar. Not real piss and vinegar. The main ingredients aside from the pork were garlic and paprika. Ingram likes the sausage fine the way it is now. Costs $1. For a quarter more, he gets an extra bun to soak up the grease from his plate. Still, he asks the peddler why the butchers changed something that was perfectly good the way it was. Same reason they always change things, the peddler says. Pig business got tricky. Fucking B&Bs. The town's bed and breakfast operations are the peddler's second favorite subject after the linguiça. He considers inns and the people who frequent inns to be the worst kind of fascists. He tells Ingram that out in Wasp country on the islands, there are dry towns. Tisbury, for example. Chilmark for another. Worse than the terrorists, he says. At least those guys got the Quran telling them how to think. B&B's just dream this shit up on their own, just to fuck with the little guy. Ingram must have looked a little dubious about the linguiça and the Quran because at the end of the week, the peddler brings something special for him. It's one of the old sausages, the kind they used to make. He bought 100 pounds 10 years ago and kept it deep frozen all this time. Then thawed and grilled one up just for Ingram to put some hair on his chest. Ingram eats it without a bun. The meat is burnt from the freeze and tough from the passage of time. And really he's being polite when he praises it. Delicious, he says. Much better. Shut the just hold on a minute, the peddler says. It tastes like fucking dog food, that's not, just hold on. Peddler points to his wrist, which is bare, but Ingram understands that the man is timing something. And for a while, neither of them speaks. It's a gray, drizzly day, and there's nothing so important in a down-market beach town that a little time can't be spared. The rain washes over the sidewalk and streaks the bottom of their sandals. The salt seeps into everything here. It's on the side of the buildings, on the cottages, on the streets, and on the residents too. Their hair gets coarse. People used to keep pigs because there wasn't a fertilizer strong enough to stand all that salt, and pig shit was the only way to make anything grow. That's what the peddler meant before about the sausage and the B&Bs. The tourists must have decided that they shouldn't have to put up with the smell and zoned the pig farms out of existence, and eventually the scarcity drove up scrap meat prices and forced the butchers to compromise on their sausages. At least that's what Ingram thinks he meant. There are any number of explanations. Almost 10 minutes pass in silence, and finally, the peddler smiles and leans over the handlebars of his bike. All right, he says. All right, what? He runs a finger across his forehead, temple to temple, still smiling in that same proud way. Go ahead. Ingram makes the same gesture. And on his fingertip is a coat of grease. Well, the peddler says, taste it. The man is excited, and Ingram doesn't want to disappoint him after all they've been through this last week, so he puts his finger into his mouth. Jesus. Huh? What'd I tell you? His finger tastes like garlic, like he just ran a bulb through a press. That's a fucking linguiça, the peddler says. You don't buy garlic like that, you rent the shit, and it's still worth any dollar you ever spent. Jesus, Ingram says again. That was fast. The peddler laughs, and the bike rears back like a skittish horse. Human body, he says. Simplest machine there is. That's what I've been trying to tell you. Ingram knows that he shouldn't be so impressed, but he is. He's been in town 2 weeks and heard all the stories from Cassie, from her family, from the guys on the dock, about how summers used to be, how the village used to be, with clean waters, dance halls, handsome women, cheap beer, good drugs, 3 lobster boats, 2 clammers, 2 trawls, and a 65-foot scalloper. He took it all for bluster. It hadn't occurred to him, not even once, that the women, or the drugs, or the boats were any better, or that there was any meaningful difference between the new sausage and the old. He wants to apologize, but he doesn't know how. So he says the only thing that comes to mind. Fucking B&Bs. The peddler slumps down a little further in the handlebars of his bike. When Ingram puts his dollar into the change purse, the whole bike seems to shudder and sigh. Thanks.
Hello. Hello. As you may have guessed, my name is Belal, and I like you. I'm reading from a couple parts from my collection, and this part's called The Unfortunate Family of Layla the Magnificent. Some of us remember the couple's walks through Esquire Park, them smiling and swinging their clasped hands like a defense. They waved to people, but never stopped to chat. He had no desire to be one of us. In fact, no one had seen inside of the Durrani's home. Baby Layla learned to crawl when she was only 5 months old. At 6 months, she said her first word, wow. Her parents embarrassingly told one of us that she might have learned the word from television. So whenever she was in the playpen downstairs, they put the television on mute. Years later, when we told us to Layla, she said that was probably why she stared at people's lips when they spoke. The Durranis had a difficult time keeping up with Layla. As a toddler, she would open a diaper, sit on it, try to stick the tabs around her hips. If she stood up and the diaper dropped, she would get another, which meant digging in the baby box and shoveling half of the stuff out. Her parents would dump the box and put the bibs, lotions, wipes, sanitizers, and bottles back in their Tetris arrangement. This happened so often that crunching plastic made Naeem and Farah jump out of their naps, burst out of bathrooms, and abandon conversations. Naeem eventually put the box at the top shelf of the hamper. It took months for Layla to give up reaching for it. Her debut performance came in her backyard. She rainbow posters Layla the Magnificent and hung them all around the walls of the school. Those of us with children let the rest of us know. Some of us called the Durranis, letting the couple know how excited we were. According to Layla, her parents did not expect more than a few kids. The Durranis had to buy 2 months worth of nuts, raisins, and tea. They had to seed and cut their grass and put in new flower beds along the edge of the yard. On more credit, they bought 50 lawn chairs and ordered short-notice catering from a kebab place in Fairfax. Naeem had to abandon his Saturday work slot, and Farah had to invite her boss if she was to take the day off. On the afternoon of the performance, we saw Naeem and Farah giving sharp, beaten looks to one another. Once, when they were alone, we saw Farah netting her thumbs into Naeem's shoulders, leaning her forehead on the back of his neck, trying to stay standing. On one of her visits here, Layla said that she believed that when her parents went to get plates and take her seats, they snuck upstairs to conspire about post-show performances. The grand finale involved Farah feigning a hacking cough, and Layla pulling out coin after handkerchief after rubber ball from her mother's mouth, curing her from her magical throat sickness, and then it turned real. This next one I call Rappers in Conversation. Yo, check this out. What? Here's what I'ma do you. Bullets fish size. Send some piranhas through you. Lift this man up to God. Can I get a hallelujah? What the hell? Stop. No, please stop. I got bars, son. I got bars. Chocolate bars. You heard me. Weight all around your waist. How you have a 360-degree ass? You look like a pear. You want to start? I bet your mom clenched when you came halfway out. That's why it looked like you got a tire as a belt. Are you serious? I bet you never drown looking like a broken globe. Only the southern hemisphere and shit. Feel my arm, all muscle, baby. Look like if I press your arm, you're going mustache. You hippopotamus, chia pet looking dude. Why you look like a hard-boiled egg? You look like Grimace. Yeah? How you skinny and lumpy at the same time? You look like 3D directions to my house. You look like a rock slide. You look like a map of a mountain trail. Fuck you. Talking about heads. Did you get your money back? Money back? Yeah, from the barber that used that piece of glass in your hairline. Your beard looked like pubic hair coming out of a birthmark. Yeah, your lips look like when you sneeze, baby powder comes out. Looks like you brush your teeth with grenades. Look at your skin. You look like your mom smokes. You look like Aladdin with leukemia. That's bad. Like a defrosted chicken. I bet your shadow has eczema. Yeah? You look like you stink. Like if you take your watch off, your wrist stinks. With that big-ass nutsack nose, you look like you could smell what I'm thinking. Bet you'd be like, where you going? Burger King? Alright, cool, bring me back something. Who the hell put your outfit together? Them damn Vietnam shorts look like a covert operative for the Salvation Army. Bet you were the dude at school who put his whole mouth around the water fountain. Pressing the button with them damn chicken nugget fingers. I bet you can't text nobody. I bet you can't play video games. You done? Your net fat looks like a stack of CDs. Are you done? Okay, I'm done. Your mom has Drake eyebrows. Oh, you want to talk about moms now? Yeah, that's her.
My name's Wil Weitzel, and Thank you to the Center for Fiction for the chance to be here, and to all of you guys for coming. This is an excerpt from a short story. She had a face ruined by weather, but when I was young, she'd come back to us in the summers, and it wasn't like that yet. Back then, her eyes were big and dark, and the skin around them smooth. She'd come in always on the afternoon train, but she wouldn't say which day. So rather than driving the few miles into town and waiting at the station, we'd wait at home. When she'd get here, one of us would ask. Soon, soon, my father would assure the group of us. But he couldn't say more because he didn't know. Then she'd come walking down the dirt road. The train always got into town just after noon, so she'd be within eyeshot by 1 p.m. Dust clouds would billow up behind her like she were her own small kind of storm. We'd go running. We'd haul out across the field and start yanking down the big pack from her shoulders. Every one of us wanted it. For the time being, we'd ignore her altogether, except to maul her to seize that huge pack off her shoulders. Each of us hoped to be the one to carry it in. It seemed so tall and heavy, an unimaginable burden. She'd laugh as we closed in, all 4 of us, her brothers. She'd already have loosened the pack, undone the belt strap, even eased its harness to the edges of her shoulders. I can only speak for myself, can only imagine what this was to the others. For me, that last 1/8 of a mile to the house, it was a great desert. If I could just wrest the pack free from those jackals, I too would make a crossing, would move across a reach of savanna, breach a ridgeline. But it never happened. Even if I'd been the strongest, which surely I wasn't, the pack was too heavy to carry at a run. Besides, you had to heave it with all the others hanging onto buckles and hitches, loops and straps. Inevitably, while she laughed, then told us to be careful as there were gifts inside. We'd resort to carrying her pack as you would a dead body, with the group of us the pallbearers. So by the time we reached the gravel drive and my father beheld us, we were already a kind of spectacle, a parade. He'd stand just outside the door of the house, tall, squinting, and he'd be looking at her. I'll always remember that. While she was still at a distance, he'd take her in, then shyly wave when she was already there with him, up close, as though she'd interrupted his dream. Then he'd hold her for a long, long time, just before he'd let her go, say her name. She'd quickly assimilate into our way of life. She'd work until 3 p.m. That was as far as we allowed her to bargain. She'd be hunched over her papers, writing, until we came scrambling down the slope for her. Some afternoons, and these were my favorite, she'd have heard us coming or known it was time and slipped into the dark lake. Even in summer, the lake, filling a long, steep cavity of granite, was a dark, deep green. We'd see her workplace on the dock, the papers, a book or two of poetry from somewhere in South America. We'd feel the heat of her feet or her breath, or say we did. But she herself would be gone. "Come on," Tom would shout, because he was the oldest. And he'd begin scouring the pine woods in the ravine below the house on the shore of the lake. "I'll take by the rocks," I'd call. But then I'd stall where I was, close to the dock. There was a place she'd shown nobody, as far as I know, though I had seen her there 100 times. Or it felt like so many. It was a deep niche in the shoreline, extending vertically, a narrow crevice cut into the rock. The waves came in and lapped against the smooth granite and made an ominous gurgle, first echoing, then emerging as from a thin, dark throat. She could hold her breath a long time, but I was always hoping she'd waited to submerge until just before I'd approached. I swear I never wanted to cost her breath, so I'd hum. I'd hum out fiercely as I hopped the boulders along the shore, and still louder as I drew close and peeked into the cleft in the granite that from above was like a tomb and sank 40 feet or more down into the lake. There she'd be somewhere near the bottom. Her bikini, I remember, being bright yellow, and even at depth, a low yellow song trailing upward through the dim light. Deep in that tight shaft of water were the faint happenings of her legs, just below the long dark hair that was like an octopus, black and so far down as to be impossible. Then I'd lift my eyes and keep walking along the shore, as though I'd seen nothing. After a while, the others would spread out, losing faith. "She's under the dock," someone would call. And we'd hear her when she crawled in from the lake, up under the dock, and begun singing always the same song, her song, until we were all singing it, until we sang it even when she was gone. I'd join in, standing with the others on the dock, above her. Before long, all of us scrabbling on our bellies and cramming our eyes into cracks, searching for her, seeking a glimpse, then singing through those cracks between the boards, singing down to her with our wet mouths pressed against the wood. I don't believe any of us in those days knew what we were singing, nor who the girl was with our lungs all bursting we were singing to. Only that there was someone who'd emerge afterward, after we'd sung it through together. She calling upward and we down, smiling, her long dark hair slicked back, her face cold from the lake, and beautiful and tight against its bones. "I knew you were under the dock the whole time," Tom would announce as we mauled her, climbed on top of her. "You were always there." She'd look over then, tilting her eyes, and smile at me from long green depths.